Welcome to the Boardroom Sessions podcast with your host, Mike Miller. In these sessions, we get to meet up close and personal with the best and the brightest technology leaders and executives in Southern California. We learn about their backgrounds, their business models, and their challenges. We learn about their goals and what makes them tick. Hope you enjoy. In this Boardroom Sessions podcast, we meet Mostafa Khairzada. Mostafa is the Director of Clinical and Emerging Technologies with Pacific Dental Services. We learn how he turned his personal challenge into his why. We talk about emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning. We talk about building the dream team and the 5 pillars. Hope you enjoy. Mostafa, welcome to the Boardroom Sessions podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This is exciting.
Awesome. So Mostafa, you're with PDS.
I am.
Pacific Dental Services here in Irvine,
California.
Awesome. And Mostafa, why don't you bring everybody up to speed? What does PDS do?
PDS, Pacific Dental Services, is what we call a dental service organization. Essentially, we're a platform company, and we provide a set of services to dentists, who we call owner doctors. And so we thought that how great it would be when you come out of college as a dentist that you practice medicine instead of trying to practice IT and real estate and legal and marketing and all of the other different disciplines that are required to maintain a good business. And so Steve, our founder, he just thought, maybe if I did all of this part, that dentist could then concentrate on improving the patient satisfaction.
Yeah, and so you provide all of that as a service.
All of it as a service,
right?
Yeah.
And then you go into practice together with that dentist and share in their profit.
Absolutely, yeah. And it makes it so much more of an intimate relationship in a sense that both parties are so vested for one another's success, which is why I think PDS is so successful.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so you have a pretty cool role here.
Yeah, not bad.
In particular, right? You get to play with what's new and shiny on the healthcare front.
Yeah.
Right. So you focus a lot on the actual clinician part of the business. Although you have a very technical role in the fact that you're looking at new technology and you're looking at new ways in which to get information on your patients and better serve the patients. But you get a chance to play with all the new cool technology. Like you have a bunch of playground equipment over at your office.
Well, I don't know about playground equipment, but I got to tell you, there's a story behind it. I don't even know if I've actually told you the story about how I got into healthcare. So about 5 years ago, it's this long, sad story, but it's kind of got a great ending to it, I think. So I started seeing some odd lights in my vision about 5 years, almost 6 years ago. And I thought it was kind of a strange thing. And I had been an IT guy for 17, 18 years. And I was mostly in the infrastructure, project management, leadership roles. But I started seeing all these different lights. And I thought, you know what? This is a big deal. So I went and saw a doctor. And when my doctor saw me, he was a retina specialist. He said, you are having this thing called vitreous. There's this jelly in the back of your eye. It's coming off. It's tearing off your retina. We're going to have to take you into emergency surgery. And I was like, oh, my God, what's happening?
And how old were you when this happened?
This is 5 years ago, man. It's not even that long. Yeah.
Wow.
So this is me in my early 40s, and I'm trying to figure this out. And I'm scared, right? I'm scared. I don't know what my future is going to hold. And so I go to this doctor, and he took really good care of me. And then afterwards, I started seeing other ophthalmologists, and I started going to other universities for secondary and tertiary kind of opinions, right? And as I'm going, I noticed that every hospital, every single one of them asked me to sit down and take the CT scan, to sit down and refill out a health history form, to sit down and refill out another application, and sit down and give them my insurance again. And just so you know, the experience I had was so poor in healthcare that not only was I dealing with my own personal trials, but at the same time, I was looking at how is this industry not one, it's not together, And so, I was out of the office for like 3-4 months, and I came back, And Bill Russell was our CIO at that time. I was working at St. Joseph Health.
Right.
And I went up to him.
Bill runs a big podcast, by the way. He's got a vlog and a podcast out there.
Yeah, Bill's my guy.
Yeah.
So Bill, I saw Bill and I said, he said, how did it go? And I said, it was awful. I had to carry a manila envelope everywhere I went. And so he said, well, what do you want to do about it? And I thought that was an interesting question because he's right. What do I want to do about it? What can I do about it? And so as a techie in the healthcare field, I decided that I was going to completely change my focus and become 100% health clinical specific instead of IT healthcare specific.
Right.
So a lot of the work that I do today is really based on my own experiences, on my own personal trials and tribulations and failures as what I saw in how we were managing our patients' records. How are we helping them cope with the situation that they're in mentally? And on top of it, we add all of this additional paperwork and testing and retesting and revalidating. So, that's just so you know my background.
Well, that's a very personal play into what you do every day.
Yeah. So this is why people say that, oh, I love that you're always playing with new tech, but for me, it's a lot more than that. It's how am I going to help improve that patient's interaction, regardless if it's dental or big healthcare. To me, I'm a healthcare technologist, and that's what the driver is for me. They always say why. What's your why? What's your reason? And that's mine. I want to make that whole interaction for the patient seamless, so that they can concentrate on healing instead of all this other stuff that goes around with it.
That's amazing. That's Eric Thomas's favorite quote, right? E.T. What's your why?
What's your why?
What's your why, right? And so that's a great why, and that explains a lot for me as a guy who interacts with you on a regular basis here at PDS.
Right.
I know that we're often talking about making this experience more like a retail-friendly, good, fast, convenient experience, which is juxtaposed to what you're really doing, which is dentistry, which could be anything further from a fast, quick, easy experience. People have it in their head that it's this long, lengthy, painful, negative connotation experience. However, we're going to talk about some things that you're doing very much so to make that a better environment.
Absolutely.
So you're an SC grad. I won't hold that against you.
Fight on.
We have the Tommy Trojan in common. I told you that story about my Uncle Russ, but I won't bore the rest of the folks here.
He is the bust of Tommy Trojan. That should not go unsaid.
Yeah, Mike. He was a college All-American, college Hall of Famer, but I digress. So how did you get to PDS, and what was the role in which you have here at PDS technically?
Interesting. I have a long story for everything, so you got to cut me off and just get to the point, man.
Get to the point.
Yeah. So at the previous company I was at, some of the visionaries left. The visionaries left, and it was just this, like, I sensed like there was almost an innovation vacuum. One of the execs came to me and he said, hey, I know you're used to working in this kind of a space, but we're no longer that. We're looking at ensuring that we keep the lights on and we figure out how to do our operations better. What's interesting is that for me, I understand keeping the lights on, but to me, what's more important is figuring out which is the better bulb. That's the key for me. So I knew that.
Innovator.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the thing is that that's when I said, yeah, it's time for me to kind of figure out what my next move is. And then of course, one of my dear friends, David Baker, he's a CIO here. He's a great dude. I can never say enough good stuff about him. It also
helps your career path.
Helps my career path, so I don't have to say anything bad. But you know what? There's sometimes you work with people where you fundamentally disagree on some core things, and it's okay, right? Because you work well together. David and I have this really interesting relationship where we're in sync so often. It's very, very, very it's very different for me to know that somebody who sees it the same way I do. It's just really.
He also likes a challenge. So to challenge him on a thought is actually a benefit to him. He wants to be surrounded by people who are thinking, people who are pushing, people who are challenging. And so I'm certain from watching the interactions that you challenge him, and he probably gets a lot out of it.
And he does the same with me. You know, he gets it. And I think that's ultimately in healthcare, I believe, in healthcare and in leadership within technology, if you're not thinking about tomorrow and further out beyond that, I think you're creating that you know, you're kind of falling behind. And that's where I see some healthcare organizations kind of falling in that path.
Mm-hmm.
But I figured, you know what's the best way for me to really get back into the groove, into the swing of things? So, you know, I was very blessed to have David, you know, I talked to him and I said, hey, how is it over there? And he was just like, oh, it's entrepreneurial, man. It's amazing. We're doing some great things. That's my David impersonation.
That's a good one.
But, you know, the energy and the excitement that he has, it's contagious. I had to come.
Oh, yeah, it is. So what role is it that he brought you in at?
So I had the emerging and clinical and emerging technologies department. So clinical and emerging technologies. And really, this is a really interesting department because on June 1st of 2017, when I first started, it was a team of one. Today, we have close to 57 people on this team. It is not just about bringing in the shiniest and most modern technologies, but it's really understanding workflows and understanding back office flows and seeing where we can, as technologists, help.
Right.
And where are we as technologists actually hurting, right? And so to be able to see those two things, it's really interesting. And one of the things that I've really you know, seen here very specifically is, whereas, you know, in some other healthcare organizations, you'll have the IT department drive a lot of these clinical projects. And so IT folks, you know, we understand IT. We're not the clinicians by any means. At this company, the great part of it is that a lot of the inventions and innovative mindset is really started by the clinical areas. And they know to do that because we have, you know, in the IT department, a leadership group that's so open and accepting. So whereas in the past, it was IT that would spin off projects that would impact the clinicians that then would impact the patient, here I'm seeing that the clinicians are putting together ideas and thoughts that IT then is implementing,
right,
which is a really cool, you know, switch up.
And so let's give the audience a little bit of background on some of that cool technology that's there for a baseline, right?
Okay.
The things that you and I think we have down, we're not maybe bringing everybody up to speed on. So tell us about CEREC. Tell us about the Invisalign. Tell us about some of these technologies and where you've taken the technology. So folks at home, think of a dentist's office the last time you've been at the dental office, and then let Mostafa explain to you some of the things that's table stakes going on today at Pac Dental.
You know, one of the core things that I hear, you know, some of the folks here at PDS talk about is same day. And it always boils down to convenience. How do we make taking care of our patients, you know, easy, fast, and convenient? And so, you know, I believe it was like 2006 or 2005 during that time period, you know, there was a big investment made in CEREC, which is this system that allows us to do a 3D image model of your mouth. And we can quickly then send that image and the instructions to a mill that will then literally mill out a crown for you
on the spot in the office. So
in the office.
If you guys can think 3D printer, but the technical term is actually a milling, because they take a block of ceramic block,
right.
And then with the 3D image, they then the system will literally mill out to nanometers the exact tooth. I'm wearing 2 of them. If anybody wants to come take a good look at one, I've got 2 of them in my mouth now that are literally printed right there while you're there, or milled there on the site, and then put in your tooth before you leave that day.
Yeah.
So that's very cool, cutting edge technology. The 3D imaging in and of itself is mind blowing that you can do that there to that degree of technology.
You know, and I have to always go back to innovation and being inventive starts with vision and ends with courage. If you think about it,
okay.
Right?
Sounds like we got a book in the making here.
I'm just saying, it does. It starts with, and this is where I see, I wonder if he's going to get mad that I'm talking about him so much. But Steve's got this mindset where
Steve Thorne, owner of Pacific Dental.
Yeah, he can see, and then he has the courage to implement. And I think that's what he did with CEREC. When everybody else was too afraid because the economy wasn't doing that great, he doubled down on this. He had that knowing and that instinct to pull that trigger. And that kind of mindset has built a culture here from that time period on. And so this company, more than many others that I've ever worked at, is so much more open to bringing in modern technologies. Innovation and emerging tech are just terms we use for new stuff, right?
This is a business, and you're trying to find new, unique business angles to drive more patients to the dentist in more areas, right?
Yeah.
Your model is unique. Now your technology is unique.
Yep.
And what some of the things we're going to talk about on the patient journey here and your other health issues, systemic health issues that you're trying to solve for are all business opportunities at the end of the day.
Well, yeah, so they are, the philosophy that I follow for my department anyway. So being that I come out of big healthcare, I have this affinity for understanding, well, let me just break it down. I run out of 5 pillars. So every project that I take on has to fit at least in one of these pillars, right? And this is no specific order, so they're all equally important. Is this technology that we're about to bring into the office going to reduce their overall cost of doing business? Is it going to bring something to them that's going to help reduce their costs? Is it going to be a technology that's going to help them increase revenue? So, these are the questions we ask ourselves as we're looking at new things. Is it going to reduce costs? Is it going to improve revenue? Is it going to improve patient satisfaction? Are patients going to say, oh my God, I loved knowing that you knew exactly that I was in the waiting room for 3 minutes and I got a full mouth x-ray in 11 and a half minutes. Like you knew that and you followed it all the way around. I mean, these are some of the technologies that we're thinking about. So is it improve patient satisfaction? The 4th pillar is what I call clinical adoption. Clinical adoption this is that theory that I talked about earlier, right? Where in the past you had IT making decisions for the clinical environment and implementing and kind of forcing them to work within those parameters. So it's like a square into a circular hole or whatever. Here, the clinicians are helping kind of put some of those ideas out. So when we deploy a technology that actually works and has some kind of benefit, it's the clinicians that are going to adopt it. And so to me, I think, will a clinician adopt this technology? Will they like it? And we have some examples of that I can talk about. And then the 5th and final pillar is, how does this technology, if at all, but how can it help the patient's outcomes? Does it reduce, healing time? Does it reduce the amount of time they're sitting in the chair? How does it help in that outcome? And so those are the things that I look at whenever we're evaluating different kinds of technologies.
Well, I'd say so far so good. As a patient, I'm loyal, right?
Yeah, I love that.
I've been loyal before I was doing business with Pacific Dental. I've been loyal because it was easy and it was quick experience, right? So I liked that technology because it got me in and it got me out. I didn't have to come back 5 days later after you guys went and out to some, laboratories to go have somebody make a tooth for you. It was done right there. So that was quick and easy. And I'll tell you, the retail experience is becoming more and more important, right? And so as far as technology is concerned, the retail experience that we talk about is in action, and you're investigating in your 5 pillars. You talked about having customer satisfaction, right? How the patients are satisfied, and surveying them to make sure that they're doing it, right? So I'll give you an example. I use as a litmus test my kids, right? How do my kids buy today? How do my kids interact with people out in the world as far as when it comes to making a transaction and buying services? And so I've found that they like stores where you don't have to wait in a register line anymore. You walk up to someone and you can opt to not even take the stuff home. You can have it shipped to your house. You can swipe your card right there on somebody's iPad. You use iPads in your business. Your clinicians try and upsell me into other things and services while I'm in the chair, captive audience, with an iPad, right? So they're having conversations using the iPad. They're trying to get me out of there as quick as possible so they can get the next person in and make it a better experience for me.
Yeah. So I think I think from us, just my experience here at PDS, I've noticed that we genuinely, and when I say we, it's like the collective clinical groups in the offices that PDS supports, and they genuinely care about the findings and their early diagnosis of your oral health. And so, I don't know if I consider it upselling. I consider it more like them providing you different options of bettering your health and the outcomes of your health. But the fact that they have that data available to them in the palm of their hand is part of that win for us, right? We want to make it so that the patients see exactly what we see. And there's some tech that we're playing with. Like we're experimenting with putting live video on the loops that the doctors wear. So imagine like you have your child that's 7-8 years old. You ever remember going to the dentist and the dentist like waving you in and trying to point into the mouth and all that? It's really hard to see, and the kid's just kind of moving around.
Mm-hmm.
We thought, how uncomfortable is that for the patient in the chair, for the parent that's trying to peer over, or somebody like me with poor eyes, I can't even see the difference. How great it would be if they were just holding an iPad or a tablet of some kind and it was just a live feed, the doctors pointing out these things that they're finding concerns with. That's what we're trying to do, is really build the trust between the patient and the clinician. I think that's where, once you build that trust, I think that then that snowballs on itself.
Yeah. I agree. And I think that there's some very cool ways in which you can use technology today to bridge some of that experience and make it a better experience, right?
Yeah.
Some of it's mundane. We've talked about scorecards and surveys and things of that nature. We've talked about recording call data.
Right.
That's one of the initiatives being worked. We're talking about voice recording, all recordings into and out of a dental office, using that data to scorecard for people, or using that data for oral systemic health information, right? Why don't you bring everybody up to speed on the overall health of a body and how the oral portion of that comes into play, and where you think there's business opportunities therein from a dental office to then cross over into a more systemic environment.
Right. That's one of the things that PDS is really looking at, is tying back. One of the more fun things about talking with me is I'm just going to talk really normal, right? So I'm not going to use like all this crazy internal terminology. But have you ever met someone that's had like really bad breath, but it's not from brushing their teeth?
That they're unhealthy.
Yeah.
Right?
You can tell, right? That smell is coming from the inside of their body and out. That's not something like mouthwash can be, or flossing or brushing your teeth. That's a smell that's coming from the inside. And that there's something wrong. With just that basic knowledge, there's clinicians that are thinking about, how does calcium buildup in the mouth affect calcium buildup in the arteries? Or how does, one part of your mouth impact the rest of your body? And this is kind of a lot of these studies that are coming out called oral systemic health, or oral systemic links. These are the things that we're looking at. And so I think that if we were to look from an emerging technologies perspective, in the next few years, we're probably going to rely heavily on, artificial intelligence and machine learning to help us really bring those correlations together.
To look for early indicators.
Early indicators, absolutely.
Right.
And how better, it's one of those things that I would love to know in advance what might happen to me in the future, so I can change my practice and my behaviors today.
Right. You're using some of that technology today. So you're using artificial intelligence.
Well, we're developing it. We're looking at a lot of options to develop certain things. With artificial intelligence and, there's deep learning and shallow learning and all that stuff. I think what we're looking at is just how can we empower clinicians to be great at what they do and have the power of, dozens and dozens of industry best practicing clinicians behind them. And the reason I say that is because AI takes, you have to develop the code, but the training piece is the most difficult part. And in order for artificial intelligence and ultimately machine learning, for it to be effective, it has to be taught correctly by the right people. This system isn't all, dependent on itself. Human interaction and human correction is so mandatory for it to be great in the future. And so now imagine if you're looking at X-rays and like if you're a brand new doc coming out of college and you've got your patient there and you pop up these X-rays and the X-rays will start showing, we think there's some areas that you should consider here, here, and here. But as a brand new doc, imagine having that confidence when you're talking to the patient, knowing that this information that you see is exactly what you were thinking from your own personal study and knowledge. That double check is pretty fantastic.
Right.
Yeah.
And today with video, for example, doctors in different locations can get together and collaborate and have discussions around different methods and procedures and best practices. They can make second opinions, all of that done real time today.
Real time, right? Yeah. So it's so weird. This is the best time to be alive. Have you thought about that? It is.
No, I believe that. I believe that truly.
We're in such a good place because whatever we can imagine, we can pretty much build if we think about it. Mm-hmm. Especially within healthcare. There's so many things that we're still trying to solve for, but it's so much easier to collaborate, whereas 15, 20 years ago might not have been. It's so much easier to get instant input and output. And like within seconds.
Oh, for sure.
People with thousands of miles away.
Yeah, let's talk about the consumer model for a second. So we think about going to a dentist. It's an event. You have to come to a dental facility, go sit in a clinic's dental chair, and have services done to you. But I'm certain from having conversations with you, that's not where you see it all, right?
No, yeah.
That's some of the procedure, but we talk about the convenience, the patient journey, right? Is the term that we use around here.
Right.
So talk about the patient journey and how you see people having better access to an app per se, a PDS app or something where you'll be able to interact on their time and their method at their preferred location, like home.
Yeah. So who says data is the new oil? Is it you or Baker?
I stole it from a slide. Okay. I sent it on a LinkedIn post.
Right.
And he's robbed it. Now it's his. So,
but he's right. And so
right.
Are you. Data is the new oil. I think that in order for us to be effective at reaching our patient consumer populations, we have to know a little bit about them, a little bit about their practices and their behaviors. I think this is kind of common in every industry, but just being able to know if they like text messages versus a phone call, or if they prefer to get a mailer instead of getting, whatever, it's just, how do you know how people like to be interacted with? So part of the patient journey is really understanding that. I mean, I'd hate it if I got a bunch of calls from a robot saying, hey, you should go get your eyes checked today. I'd hate that. But I wouldn't mind that if I got a text message that said, hey, it's your 1 year, Dr. So-and-so is waiting for you and they're excited to have you come back. I'd love that.
Right.
Whereas if somebody left me a voicemail, I think I have like 38 voicemails I haven't heard yet.
Yeah. So it's your preferred method.
Yeah, it's just your preferred method. That's part of that journey, that first part of the journey. The second part of the journey is really letting patients have access to whatever it is they need within their health record. And I mean, and I'm not saying this is where we're going now, but I think this is where we ought to go as an industry, where we don't rely on patients to walk around with manila envelopes under their arms from one clinician to another, or getting tested and retested, because we know healthcare is expensive and we know why it's expensive. So how can we help reduce that cost, which is, I see it only can come through record sharing. Now, for us, you talked about
dental isn't traditionally in the mix for record sharing, right?
Well, I mean, I don't
there's
think
initiatives right now on healthcare in general for everything from the head down, right?
Yeah.
There's methods and procedures and legislation and groups and all of that kind of trying to make sure everybody's forcing each other to share data.
Yeah,
correct?
yeah. And there's so many very valid reasons why people don't, if you believe it or not. There's so many valid reasons. I personally think it would be better for us if we did, but that's my opinion. Now, here's what one little caveat with Pacific Dental Services. PDS really started thinking about, with the oral systemic link, how can we provide the best in healthcare, not just oral dental healthcare. So there's a couple of different primary care offices that we've partnered up with and kind of brought on. And so we have another one coming up in January that we're bringing in, which is really a testament to the vision, I think, of moving forward, right? How do we get a one-stop shop? I mean, as a consumer patient, I would love it. If I walk into an office, it looks great. It's modern in design. It's quiet. I sit down. I know exactly how long I'm going to be in the waiting room. And I know it in advance of going there. That's going to be the tricky part. And then to know that once I'm done, my dentist and my primary care doctor both will have the same information. And when they're analyzing my health in the future, that they're considering both pieces of data, not just one and hoping the other will share,
Sure.
That's the direction. I think that's the best.
And so there's a business opportunity there because there's money to be made in having that client, having that patient. If you have the patient now for the medical, for the tooth, and you can move them over into the medical environment, there's a good business model there.
Yeah, so it's funny because you won't hear me talk a lot about business models. For me, the grand win is the patient experience, right? Even at the bottom of my signature, it says it's all about the experience, and it is like IT is all about the experience. But it is.
Sounds like
really
a little bit of marketing too.
Yeah, I'm just saying it is all about the experience, and that's the thing that I really hope that many other healthcare organizations start considering that experience. That singular record, the one place to go for everything. I mean, I loved it when, that one grocery store opened up in like 2000 that had like every department ever, and I didn't have to go places. It's just a one-stop shop.
Yeah.
And it was all convenience, and I think that we're all looking like at that in the future. It's how convenient can we make healthcare be?
Yeah. Speaking of convenient, being in California and thinking about the business model,
right?
I might be a little biased here. I live in Orange County. I surround myself with people who are forward-thinking,
right,
who try and get ahead of the curve as far as health is concerned.
Yeah.
I have a nutritionist that I see every so often.
Nice.
I worry about. Not worry. I think about what I eat, and I work out and do things of that nature, and I hang out with guys that do the same.
Right.
And so one of the things I think about often is I've heard that there's a relationship between doing some testing that you can do in your mouth with swabbing,
yeah,
and finding bacteria that's in my mouth that might be a key indicator for things that are off in my body. That could be
that's the oral
changed.
Systemic health. Yeah, that's the
right?
whole thing. Yeah.
And so have you thought about going and offering these kind of upfront services to people where they could pay to get a scan, pay to get a...
Yeah, actually I don't know if actually our new medical offices are doing DNA swab testing.
Yes.
So they do offer that, yeah.
Yeah, see that there's a business model there. So I'm always thinking about
You're always thinking about the business.
There's always an
I'm thinking about the
opportunity
patient,
for that,
the patient
right?
experience.
There's people that will pay to have that service done.
Yeah, why not?
So why not? So I'm just thinking outside of the box there for you. So let's talk about some emerging technologies.
Yeah, fun stuff.
That we've talked about some of the retail models, right? Some of the things. Let's talk about AI and ML and like data lakes, and what do you think you're going to be able to get out of the information? So just to give people an idea of the scale of Pacific Dental Services, you have close to 800 locations today, right?
Yeah,
and growing.
Yeah, we're
growing somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 to 100 a year, right?
Right.
And so that's a lot of data patient information that you're gathering.
Yeah.
With that information, what do you think you can mine out of that? And how are you going about it?
You know what? That's such a difficult question.
I'm sure it is.
That's such a. You know what? I have a quote on my whiteboard. You know what it says?
What?
It says, "We have all of the answers. Today, it's the questions we seek."
what do you want to find?
What do you want to find? Yeah. What do you want to tie together?
Yeah.
And do you want to, it really is up to the human imagination to figure out what they want to bring together and see if there's correlation.
So do you have a policy here for data for save all data forever until you figure out what you want to do with it?
So we have, our compliance department thinks very specifically around certain policies. So I know we currently have a lot of data. I don't know about the forever part right now, but I know that there's, it just depends on data sizes. And I think that there's opportunities to kind of archive some of that stuff. But right now, I think we have data forever so far. And the trick, I think, with AI is going to be, is how can we, so AI really, it's just, I think AI is more like an assistant, right? More people are afraid of like that silver robot coming to get you. I look at it as an assistant that has the ultimate amount of patience and just does not want to take a break for anything and just wants to go. So if I wanted to really look at all of the data and figure out how can I tie certain scenarios with other scenarios, I think we have good opportunities to do that here. Whether we're looking at all of the images that we've taken, like for instance, just to give you an idea, last year we took something close to 3 million images.
3 million X-ray images.
X-ray images, yeah. So that's a lot. That's a lot of data just for 1 year. And so imagine taking that and then running your AI through it and seeing, can I predict what's going to happen in the future based on the way this person cares for their mouth today?
Mm-hmm.
And then can I change that is what our challenge will be, well, not ours, but on the clinical side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's about those questions that you ask that data, but you need to have the data.
You need to have
it in a usable format.
And it's got to be free. So that's the other thing David talks about, right? Free the data. There's certain things that he says that just always resonate with me. Free the data, and it's the most important thing. And I think that those are both very accurate statements.
Yeah. And so some of the things we're doing with data are like the more mundane things, like within the call center or within the patient calls that go out to the dental offices.
Right.
What used to happen in a call center, or I shouldn't say what used to happen, what happens in lots of people's call centers today is that in order to find out if somebody's doing a good job as a
customer service
rep is you have to go and listen to certain calls.
Yeah.
You have to sit and scorecard those calls and put down.
Yeah.
That's all done with AI today.
It's amazing.
If you have the ability or the tool set in play, you can have AI give a scorecard and pop it out and tell you that Mostafa answered X amount of calls in a certain period of time. Use the client's name.
Yeah. Certain number of times.
Yeah.
His inflection stayed within this parameter, which is acceptable.
He let the client talk more than he talked. All of that closed for an appointment. All that's done automatically. And so you're saving people's time, which is cost and money.
That's it. So that's why I say AI is such a neat tool for us to have. And so not only can we do that at the audio level, but we can do it at the video level too. Imagine that, right? Yeah. So you have all these videos, archived videos. And if you want to search for something very specific, again, it's the same kind of technology. It'll sift through all of the language in those videos, OCR it, and then find the correlations.
That's fantastic. So let's talk about the people.
Yes.
So you have a team.
Yes,
right?
I do.
You have a team of people. And so talk to me about that team, because it's a diverse team. You've got some, what I would consider extremely brilliant folks that can do everything from code to develop to figure new ways of doing things, and you've got some people that are very process oriented, and they all have different roles. So how do you go about building that team?
That's interesting. So I'm gonna tell you a story behind this, right?
Yeah, you always have a story.
I always got. I'm like an old man. I'm like stuck in this storytelling. But I think that stories help.
People like stories.
I'm just saying.
People resonate with stories because they are taught to listen to stories.
I think and I don't know if we storytell anymore, but. Here's a couple of years ago, an interim chief information officer came to me and said, "Hey, you can't be in research and development, innovations, and operations. You got to pick one." And I thought, no, there is no picking one over the other. It doesn't work that way. And he was just like, "I don't understand. What do you mean?" And I said, because in order for you to be able to innovate, right? and I'll talk a little bit about micro and macro innovations, my own term, Mustafa-isms. But in order for you to understand how to innovate, you have to understand how operations works in any industry that you're in. So whether you're in big healthcare, you have to understand how the ED works or the cath lab works, or how does the lab work and how does the pharmacy work? I mean, know their workflows so that when you see that, then you can kind of go, well, I see a gap here and I see a gap here. If we stuck this one thing in this one spot, maybe we could blend those gaps together. Same with here. You know, I couldn't innovate at any organization if I didn't own some operations. So part of my group are the operations folks. So I'm responsible for, you know, the endpoint management and endpoint incident management of all the devices, endpoint devices that are out system wide. And so doing that, I get to learn about, you know, who's using the devices, how is it used, how can it be better used, and then you get these ideas. So who is it that told me? Let me tell you a short story long. That's how they put it. Well, anyway, so how did I come up with this group? So I thought, you know, clinical and technical emerging groups are going to need to have product managers, not project managers. See, with project managers, by definition, it has a start and an end date, it has an assigned budget, and it has and that specific scope. So scope, time, budget, right? Triple constraint.
And then they drop it.
And then that's done.
Off to somebody to operationalize.
Exactly. So now what I've done is I've blended that role into a research and development role and a design engineer role. So essentially, so the people that I have working directly with me in the clinical technologies department are people who are either have a clinical background, they're either clinicians or something like that. So I've worked with nurse practitioners, PAs, physicians, all kinds of clinicians like that. Or they are people that have specifically worked within healthcare, so they understand the not likeliness of people wanting to change doing a certain thing or change their behavior, and be able to understand it at an anthropological level, right? At the core level. Mm-hmm. And so these people that I brought in, they're, you know, I have 2 + 1 coming in. They're product managers. So essentially, I'll sit with some of our folks here, and we'll kind of ideate on some technologies that we think might be better for us to look at and see how we can bring it into the future here. And then I'll give it off to these product managers where they do all of the research behind it. So understanding, let's just say if we're looking at a specific solution, they'll look at the different companies that offer this solution, industry trends. They'll do a ROI analysis. They'll do a clinical ROI analysis. They'll do an assessment of whose jobs are augmented to what degree. And so those are the kinds of things that I really enjoy doing, because when I come back to an executive that came and said, hey, what do you think of this great idea? I can say, hey, not only did we study it like a school subject, but here are the results. Here's like the 1-page document that'll help you see if it's feasible for us to even look at it and bring it on as a potential full-blown project.
Right.
And so that's kind of what my team does. So it's a lot of R&D work, a lot of research. And then they will do an initial proof of concept of experimenting, whatever that term is that we want to use. And then once it gets really, it picks up a lot of steam, then we put it in for full, a request for full funding. And then we have a project manager implement it.
Yep.
And then those guys then will monitor that project being implemented, and then they maintain oversight. So if there are updates or upgrades or new customers that we want to add to that group of users, that they're the ones that are going to be responsible for maintaining that. So that's kind of that one core group that I brought on. It's a little different. And, this is kind of where I talk about micro and macro innovation.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of a funky term. So most health systems, large health systems, I think they fundamentally make one error. Well, I'm sure they make a lot of errors, but in my opinion, there's one error that I see overtly. It's that they would much rather spend their energy and their money on the home run.
Sure.
right? It's, can you invent this special magic stick that can help patients who are blind hear, see, and do all this other stuff? And then they invest a lot of time and effort, and maybe that comes out, and then they take it to market. And so there's 1, 2, 3, 4 things maybe that they're working on. And I think that's great. I think every organization needs to have that as another revenue generating kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But micro level innovations are day-to-day innovations that can help a department immediately. You don't have to wait 2 years for it to get to market. You can see a problem. I'll give you an example. You want to hear a cool example?
Yeah.
I worked at one of the hospitals that's local here in Orange County. And the chief nursing officer came to me and she said, hey, we have patients that are falling out of their beds. And I said, all right. And so she said, hey, we think we want to get these cameras that are going to watch these patients and all of this. And we what do you think? And so the first part of the study was really who's falling out of the beds, why are they on the beds, how often do they fall, and what happens do they fall. So that's part of the research, right?
Uh-huh.
So the part of the understanding that I came up with was we found that it was something like 64% of patients over 80 that fall out of their bed are more likely to die within the first 6 months.
Wow. So there's motivation.
There's absolute motivation, yeah. So nobody wants their patients to fall out of bed. And so they came to me and they said, hey, what do you think? Should we put these high-end cameras, or what should we do? Part of that study was really looking at it from the patient's perspective. So there's actually, my team members, I've always been blessed to have really great team members. There's pictures of my team members like literally laying in bed, and I'm taking pictures of them, like looking at their neck angles, looking how high they can get themselves. And I'm like, all right, imagine you're 90 years old. How do you, your movements and all that? And we realized that the cameras that they were looking at were so scary, especially to people who might have dementia or whatever. And so I started calling all of my different friends that are in the industry working for different companies. And I said, hey, I'm looking for a small form factor device that I can use to watch a patient and make sure they don't fall out of their bed. But at the same time, I want them to be able to see someone else. So if you have a camera pointing at you, all you see is the lens.
Mm-hmm.
But imagine there's a small camera that's looking at you, but the screen has a picture of somebody's face who's actually watching you.
Well, that would be an iPhone or an iPad.
Right. It's something like that, right?
Yeah.
And so we worked out a deal with another company. We brought these small form factor, almost robot-looking things. They're so soft. We put a little lanyard around it to tell people, hi, my name is so-and-so. We gave them real cute names. And we gave the specific reason as to why they're there. I'm here to watch over your mom. Something like that. I'm here to make sure that she's safe. And here's how I'm going to do it. And so we built these stories behind it. That's a micro-level invention or innovation in the sense that technology existed, the need was obvious, and somebody had to do the quick research, quick analysis, and deploy quickly. We ended up buying like 25 or 30 of those machines throughout different hospitals just because it fit that need so quickly. So micro innovation, I think, is something that hospitals really should consider and have it be part of their operations teams to invest in making quick changes and adjustments.
Sure. And in a retail model like yours, a micro invention could be the next big idea that's not big, not hard to implement, but changes the way people do things. For example, the iPad swiping payment for a retailer today, right? I mean, that's a game changer. It doesn't sound like a big deal to walk up to somebody and say, hey, is that all you're looking for today? And then take a card swipe and swipe it. And then ask the next question of, hey, do you want me to just ship this to your house and not have to carry it around for the rest of the day in the mall? But that's a big deal. And to my kids, it's a very cool thing. And they're going to walk past one store who has a line to go to that store to do that.
Yeah.
So that's a micro invention.
It is. And the idea is to be agile and to be quick, right? So micro innovations. So and the way that it's worked out for me is I'll get anywhere from 30 to 40 ideas per year.
That's it?
That's it. And my success rate is even worse. My success rate is right around 70%.
Okay.
So that means that 30% for sure will not work out.
Sure.
And the 70% that do work out, then we consider dropping them into projects and then deploying them out. And I think and I think I'm pretty fortunate to have a 70% number. But the reason why I think that number is this high for me specifically is because I spent a lot of time at the offices. I spent a lot of time sitting in waiting rooms. I spent a lot of time sitting in X-ray rooms. I call it rounding. A lot of the folks are really shocked to see an IT person round. And for me, it's all about observation. It's all about. I'll tell you a fun thing.
When you mean round, you mean like go to see patients?
I don't see patients. I actually kind of just go visit the office, right? I mean, and this is, obviously I'll know the folks that are there and I'll just say, hey, do you mind?
You go to the clinics and you see the business that's happening.
Do you mind if I just hang out and just see what's going on? And I remember there was one office that I sat with this little kid and I just asked him about his experience. I asked him about how he liked his dentist and what could he like to have here more. And it was just to have that conversation.
Better toys in the toy box.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. And so then a guy like me would be like, well, I don't want to put no new toys in the toy box because I know that toys carry bacteria and can really make people sick. So what if we put a flat white table and put a projector in the ceiling that can then project touch screen style on this white table so you can paint with your fingers without touching paint or move blocks or homes or whatever, and then somebody could just wipe the table real easy. So that's awesome. The kind of stuff that's like quick, fast. You see a need for it and people love it. I think that's kind of what I'm striving for in this group.
That's great. So we've covered a lot of ground here today. So we've talked about AI and ML. We've talked about how to use that in the patient journey. We've talked about the retail experience.
Yeah.
We've talked about innovation, micro versus macro innovation.
Yeah.
We've talked about your 5 pillars, right, of how you get things done here and how you make a decision process. So what do you think is the next big thing in dental care?
The next big thing in dental care.
Do you think it's going to be this systemic health correlation? Do you think that you're going to be moving into the more like doctors?
I think so. I think that I'm definitely not the business professional in this space, but just from my observation, I do see a lot more. I just think it makes sense. If you look at the millennial generation, and if you look at the younger X generation, they're all looking for get in and get out. Then you have other generations that have other needs. So for us, I think it's figuring out what do those generations want and then kind of catering to them. And so I see that we're going to take a lot of data to make those kinds of decisions and figure out. So I see us using data.
The good news is you have a lot of it.
We have a lot of
data.
And we continue to.
And I bet that in the near future, you partner with other people that have data of their own and start partnering up on how to use that data together.
Man. I hope so, yeah. I hope. We call it, HIE. So I hope that we get to like a national HIE system where you don't ever have to worry about your record. It's always somewhere.
Health information exchange.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of my own little wish for the future.
It's funny. My generation has been fairly averse to having all the information stored by everybody because I'm not certain it's all going to be sterilized. I think it's still going to have personal identifiers on my information.
Yeah.
But I asked my kids, they don't care.
They don't care. No,
they don't care. If it helps me get better, quicker, faster service, if it helps people cut through the chase and advertise better to me so I don't have to hear stupid ads about stuff I don't care about, then they're down with it. And so I just think there's a change going on about personal information, and I find it interesting.
Yeah, it is so true. I mean, I was thinking about it too. Somebody's telling me like, well, doesn't it upset you that as soon as you Google something that all the ads show up in your email? And I'm like, no, I actually want that. I want them to tell me the things that I should be buying based on understanding what are the things that I like. I don't want to see an ad for some irrelevant stuff.
As a matter of fact, some of those I used to my advantage. Right, I went shopping for a watch, and I looked at a watch, and they got my cookie. Right, they put the cookie, and so whenever I go and visit, a travel site or what have you, the watch pops up on the side. Right. So the watch was at a price point I thought was ludicrous. I wasn't going to buy it.
Yeah.
But I watched over time, and each time this cookie hit and this watch started to show up, it was less and less, and there was a better special. And it finally got to a price point that I thought was manageable. I bought the watch.
Wouldn't it be cool if somebody wrote some code that watched that price and would notify you every time the price dropped.
Yeah, it would be. It would be. Or they were just doing it through the advertising, which could have been. Yeah. So I think it's pretty cool what you're doing here. I get a chance to work with the marketing teams. I get to work with the IT teams. I get to work with the health innovation teams.
Yeah.
And I love the way you guys are all looking for a better patient journey.
Yeah, we are.
And
absolutely.
I find it fascinating, and I hope that the group found it fascinating, and look forward to seeing you at some of the networking groups around town. And let us know if you have any speaking engagements so we can come check them out.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
Take care. Hey, Mike here. Hope you liked this boardroom session. Please check back to your future sessions as we're recording a new one every month. If you want to reach out, look for me on LinkedIn or send me a note at mike@sidepath.com. That's Mike at sidepath.com.